Alrighty, so for today's lesson, we are going to be needing our notebooks. So let's make sure we have that. If we don't have a notebook, we can go ahead and make sure we have a blank sheet of paper. We'll go ahead and get it from the sub. You're also going to be needing our Hub Pink Chapter 4 tab. You're going to be needing scissors, you're going to be needing glue, and you're also going to be needing two of these, or technically one whole sheet that provides two foldables for today's lesson. So as you guys know, we have been keeping up with our tabs for each chapter. So we're going to go ahead and take a moment to cut this up, okay? And we're going to glue it into our notebooks. Careful not to cut the actual tab off. That tab is supposed to be visible in your notebook, outside of your notebook, okay? So let's go ahead and cut our tab out. It doesn't have to be super perfect, okay, as long as it gets cut out and it fits within your notebook, okay? So we're going to go ahead and do that. And as you guys can see, here is my notebook. I have tab number 3. Our vocabulary should be here. After our vocabulary, we have our AR notes. After our AR notes, we have our irregular AR verbs. So after this is where we're going to actually be putting our tab for chapter 4. If you take notes over the contractions, for those of you guys who had the contractions lesson, which was everybody, if you did do it on a page after this one, if you decided to write them down, you can obviously go ahead and go to the next clear one, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and glue this down. Y'all already know the drill. You want to make sure that you put enough glue on here that it doesn't come off, because as we know that with glue sticks, if you don't put enough, once it's dried up, it will come up from your notebook. Careful not to actually put any on the tab. That tab has to be visible outside of your notebook. So just like that, okay? And obviously you adjust it before you completely glue it down. But once it's glued down, this is what it looks like. When you close your notebook, you should be able to see the tabs, right? We have our LP, our tab number 1, tab number 2, tab number 3, tab number 4. We're starting chapter 4, so we're going to go ahead and do that, okay? Now, after having done this right here, you will be taking your chapter 4 vocabulary. I don't know why it's not. Oopsies. Okay. After doing that, you will be putting on the next page over your chapter 4 vocabulary. I forgot to print that out, so but this is where you're going to put your chapter 4 vocabulary. All right, which you guys should have already filled out. So make sure you glue it down onto your notebook after having completed this. All right. After our chapter 4 vocabulary, that is where we're actually going to put in our 2 foldables. So we're going to go ahead and take the time to cut out our 2 foldables. Okay. Doesn't have to be anything super, super fancy, super neat. They just have to be done. Okay. I'm not even going to worry about it like being completely perfect. So we have our 2 foldables. We are going to keep these boxes. These boxes are actually going to come in handy. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and keep these boxes. They are coming in handy. So we're going to go ahead and chop that up real quick. Okay. Alrighty, perfect. As you guys know, Here we go. We have our 2 boxes. And we have our 2 foldables. Y'all already know we're going to go ahead and turn this around to where the white space is facing us. And we're actually going to fold in our foldables. We're going to fold the sides in. Doesn't have to be super perfect, okay? But we're going to go ahead and fold that in. Alrighty. Just like so. Doesn't have to be super perfect as long as it's done. Now you can see that mine kind of overlaps a little bit too much. That is okay. It is what it is. It doesn't matter as long as you can still see your pronouns. So you're going to do the same thing to the other one. Okay? You're going to fold it, making sure that the words are facing the outside. If the words are facing the inside, you have folded it wrong. All right, so here we have our 2 foldables folded and our 2 boxes, okay? So, how you see it here is how we are basically going to glue it down. So make sure you take your glue stick, okay? And you take the box and you completely glue them down into your notebook. Okay, glue both of them down. Make sure they have enough glue on there. Okay. Doesn't have to be super perfect. It just needs to get done. And you want to make sure you are understanding that. Okay. We're going to go ahead and glue down our foldables as well. Just like that. We want to still be able to open it up, okay? Same thing for this one. All right, y'all already know the deal. We're going to go ahead and open up our notebooks and we are going to draw our 6-pack abs, okay? You can use one door to kind of help you create that line in the center and then do the 2 like these, okay? You're going to do that on both foldables. Again, it doesn't have to be super perfect. Just like that. You're not taking it all the way to the wings, so don't worry about the wings. Just the inside, okay? Not the wings. All right, and what we're going to do is that on this box, we are going to write ER. In this box, we're going to write IR. Okay, and that is because in chapter 4, in this lesson, we are going to learn how to conjugate ER and IR ending verbs. So go ahead and take a moment, pause the video if you need to pause the video, set up your notebook just like this, and when you unpause the video, we will be back into the lesson. All right. So our lesson is los verbos ER and IR. We're going to be conjugating ER and IR ending verbs into the present tense. But before we do that, let's review what we have seen. So here we have a verb is an action. We learned that back in chapter 3. We've learned that back in chapter 2. We've learned that back in chapter 1. An infinitive verb is a verb in its most basic form. It has not been changed from its original form. That is a definition that you learned in chapter 3 and you have it written down. It is important to understand that. We had said that there are 3 infinitive endings. Back in chapter 3, we learned how to conjugate AR ending verbs. And in this chapter, we're going to learn how to conjugate ER ending verbs and IR ending verbs, okay? And something that is important to remember as we are conjugating verbs is that verbs are made up of 2 parts, the stem and the infinitive ending. are conjugating a verb, we are removing the infinitive ending and we're adding the brand new ending. So if we use the verb hablar as our example, okay, what we are doing is What we're doing is we are basically taking this away and we are staying with the stem, and all we are doing is adding those endings. So yo hablo, tú hablas, él habla, nosotros hablamos, vosotros habláis, y ellos hablan. So this is something that we learned in chapter 3, and it's just a review that we are doing. All right, now let's focus on what the endings are for ER verbs. So these are the pronouns that you have on the front side of your foldable, and the endings that you'll see up here are what you're going to write on the inside of your foldable under the ones that say ER. So here are the endings that we are going to be learning for ER verbs, okay? First and foremost, yo is always going to end in O. That is a phrase that I have said since AR ending verbs, okay? It is also true for ER ending verbs. But what we're noticing here is that for ER ending verbs, instead of using the A, we're using the letter E. So the tu ending is going to be S. The él, ella, usted ending is going to be E. The nosotros ending is going to be hemos. The vosotros ending is es. And the ellos, ellas, and ustedes form is going to be en. So again, our endings for ER verbs are o, es, e, hemos, es, en. And we said that these endings are a reflection of who are doing the actions, okay? That is basically what conjugations are. They're just telling you the verbs themselves, the actions themselves, once they have been changed, they will reflect who is doing the action. So, yo can only end in O, tú can only end in S, él, ella, or usted can only end in E, nosotros can only end in hemos, vosotros can only end in es, and ellos, ellas, and ustedes can only end in en. So make sure you have that written down in your conjugation foldable. Now, let's go ahead and use the verb comer as an example. This is a verb that is found in your vocabulary. So first things first, we have to drop the infinitive ending. In this example, comer, ER is our infinitive ending. By us identifying the ending, what we're technically doing is we're allowing our brain to process which endings we're supposed to use. Because this is an ER verb, we're not going to be using o, as, a, amos, ais, and an. Those are only reserved for the AR verbs. Here, we're going to be using the ER endings. So we are left over with the stem, and we know that the first person point of view is always going to be yo. So here is the stem. And we said that yo always ends in what? It always ends in O. Okay? So yo como. Tu is the second person point of view, so it will always be in the second box. We're going to bring down the stem. And what is the ending that we wrote for the tu form? ES. Tú comes. Tú comes. Yo como. Tú comes. If we are using the third person point of view, we have él, ella, and usted, which is the adult you. We're going to bring down the stem. And what is the ending that we said we're going to be using for these? E. So we have come. Él come. Ella come. Usted come. Here we have nosotros. We're going to bring the stem down because we're still using the stem. You'll notice that the stem has not changed in the entirety of this. okay? And we're going to add EMOS ending, hemos, because that's the ending for nosotros. Nosotros comemos. Nosotros comemos. If we were in Spain and we were using vosotros, okay, we're going to bring down the stem. The ending for vosotros is es, accent mark over the E, not the I. And we would say coméis. Vosotros coméis. If we were using the plural third person point of view, ellos, ellas, ustedes. We're going to bring the stem. What is the ending that we learned for that? En. Comen. Comen. So when we conjugate the verb comer into the present tense, we have yo como, tú comes, él come, ella come, usted come, nosotros comemos, vosotros coméis, ellos comen, ellas comen, ustedes comen. Now, it's completely optional to use the pronouns. We could just easily say como and understand that yo is the one who's eating. We could easily say comes mucha comida, right? You eat a lot of food. And we don't understand it be you because of the es ending. Same thing for the nosotros. Now, when it gets to the third person point of view, we have three possibilities who could be eating. So for that one, we would be using pronouns just to clarify who is the one doing the action. So if we wanted to say he eats, we're going to say él come. If we wanted to say they eat, we would say ellos comen. Okay? If you have any questions, you can always pause this video and rewind back to the beginning of this section to review it one more time. Let's go ahead and move forward. All right, now let's talk about the IR verbs, okay? We're going to be talking about these in the same lesson because you'll see right now why, okay? IR endings, they have their own endings, but they're not very different to the ER endings. Let me go ahead and show you what I mean. So I want you to go ahead and write these endings on the inside of your foldable underneath the underneath the IR. So we have our foldable, you have your your ER section, and then you have your IR. So these endings, you're going to be writing underneath this one, okay, on the inside here. So let's look at our endings for IR verbs. O, es, e, imos, is, en. If we were to compare them to the ER verbs, you'll notice that there's really not much of difference. The only difference comes in the nosotros form and the vosotros form. Everything else is the same. And you'll see here that the yo will also end in o. So that statement, yo always ends in o, is true for AR ending verbs, ER ending verbs, and IR ending verbs, okay? So that's why I call it the magic phrase. Yo always ends in o. Now, the tú will continue ending in the ES. The él, ella, usted will continue ending in the E form. But when we get to the nosotros form, it's no longer hemos. It's going to be imos. Imos. When it comes to the vosotros, it's going to be is. Is. And then it goes back to normal or sharing an ending with the ER verbs for the ellos, ellas, ustedes form, en. Okay? So we have to make sure we pay attention to that. And I would highly suggest that if you have a highlighter, okay, take a highlighter and color in those endings for the IR. Okay? Or color in that square so that you understand that it's different. And do the same thing for the ER, but in a different color. Okay? All right. So the same way we conjugated the verb comer for an ER verb is the same thing we're going to be doing for an IR verb. But we're going to go ahead and use the verb escribir as our example. Escribir means to write. Escribir, to write. So, the first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be identifying our infinitive ending. IR. This is telling us that when we are looking at our foldables, we're going to focus only on the foldable that has to do with IR endings. We're going to go ahead and get rid of that, and we're going to keep the stem. We're going to keep that stem, okay? In the first person point of view, we know it's yo. So yo always ends in O. Yo escribo. Yo escribo. I write. If we wanted to say you write, we're going to say tú escribes. And what's the ending? Es. Tú escribes. When we get to the third person point of view, singular, él, ella, usted, we're going to keep that stem. The stem does not change, but the ending does. What is the ending that reflects he or she or the you formal? E. So then we read this as escribe. Él escribe, ella escribe, usted escribe. When we get to the nosotros form, we're going to keep that stem. But what is the ending we're going to be using here? Imos, with the letter I. Imos. Nosotros escribimos. We write. If we were in Spain, we'd have vosotros. Keep the stem. And then just add the ending, which in this case is IS with an accent mark over the I. Escribís. Vosotros escribís. And the third person point of view, plural, ellos, ellas, ustedes. Keep that stem, escribe. And what is the ending that's going to reflect the ellos, ellas, and ustedes form? En. Ustedes escriben. Ustedes escriben. So when we conjugate the verb escribir into the present tense, this is what it sounds like. Yo escribo, tú escribes, él escribe, ella escribe, usted escribe, nosotros escribimos, vosotros escribís, y ellos escriben, ellas escriben, ustedes escriben. Alrighty. I hope you guys will pause this video if you need to catch up, or rewatch it if you need to review anything that I have gone over regarding the IR ending verb. And that is it for our and that is it for our IR ending verb lesson. Go ahead and replay this video if you have any more questions, or if you need to go back to a certain point. I'm going to go ahead and fill in the foldable so that you know how it's supposed to look like at the end. Okay, so here we have our foldable. By this point, you should already have filled out your endings. So, o, es, e, hemos, es, accent mark over the E, not the I, en. Notice how I'm pronouncing this as hemos. I'm not saying emos like we would say it in English because we're trying to be funny, right? No, we want to say hemos. Become accustomed to saying hemos from the beginning so that you do not confuse yourself, okay? Then for the IR, we said o, es, e, imos. I-M-O-S. I know my I kind of like joined the M there, but it's an I. Is with an accent mark over the I, N. All right, and like I had mentioned before, you want to make sure that you kind of color in the box differently, okay, for each one. So I'm going to use orange for the verbo ir, and I'm going to use green. Let me make sure, yeah. I'm going to use green for the ER, okay? And I'm going to color in these two boxes because that is where the difference is at, okay? So this is how your foldable looks at the end of this lesson. Thank you so much, guys, for listening.